Good morning. Good morning. I know it's an early start on the day, and I'm delighted that you're all starting to come online. I can see more and more people coming into the chat room and being joining us. I'm Marilyn Smith. I'm with the Energy Action Project, and today's set of webinars is all about the Community Energy for Energy Solidarity project, which ENACT is involved in as part of a Horizon 2020 funded project that is investigating the degree to which energy communities already do or want to start taking action to tackle energy poverty. Our aim is to help identify which measures are most effective. As I said, I'm Marilyn Smith, founder of the Energy Action Project, which reports on energy poverty in the EU through its website Cold at Home. Our role in CEES is to manage communications and dissemination, and I'll be moderating most of the sessions today, but also want to acknowledge the work of Sophie Ranson in setting up this event. And she'll be active on social media throughout the day. A few logistics before we get started with the presentations. Our hashtag for today is CEES, that's capital CEES underscore just transition. So again, hashtag CEES underscore just transition. And please do use that when tweeting, and to tag us, our handle is Arabesque CEES underscore energy. So again, it's Arabesque CEES, all caps, underscore, and then energy. Quickly, I'll cover today's agenda and a few logistics, and then I'm going to hand it off to others to introduce CEES in more detail in this first session. We have 5 webinars in total today, each lasting about 60 or 90 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes, and we will have a question and answer period either throughout the sessions or at the end of each session. The first session is going to introduce CEES, its objectives, and its key underlying themes of energy poverty, energy communities, and energy solidarity. You'll also get a quick intro to all of the partners, and the other webinars will reflect how we've categorized the things that energy communities need to think about when they want to tackle energy poverty. That covers identifying people who are in energy poverty and engaging with them and with other actors who can help. That session will start at 10:30, and there'll be a lunch break just after that. We'll come back at 1 o'clock, and we can continue with the category of taking action to tackle energy poverty, which we recognize includes a very wide range of activities, and we're going to explain to you the difference of soft and hard measures among the many other things that need to be done. At 2:45, these are all Central European time, so if you're in the UK or somewhere else in the world, do keep in mind that we're using CET time. So at 14:45, our presenters will reveal findings related to support mechanisms for tackling energy poverty through energy communities. And from this is going to be reflecting their research on regulatory and legal aspects of energy communities and energy poverty, and on the challenges linked to funding and financing, both programs and specific projects. At 1600 today, we're going to wrap up with insights on measuring impact of your actions and also evaluating your programs overall. We are recording each session, and you should have been notified already that this session is being recorded when you joined. During the presentations, we'd ask that you please keep your cameras off and your microphones muted to avoid bandwidth problems and background noise. But we do want you to be chatty on the chat room. As we are listening to the presenters, the upside of webinars is that you can ask questions as they come to mind or express ideas when something triggers your thought process. Each session will have at least one in Q&A, as I've said, but don't feel that you have to wait for that to let us know that something has popped into your mind. Just drop it into the chat, and we will pass it on to the presenter at the appropriate moment. And we're really keen to hear what other perspectives people that are joining us today will bring to our overall thought processes and what we're doing here. And please also feel free to share relevant links. We will be saving the chats to draw inspiration for the next phases of CEES activities. So that's enough for me. Let's go on to some presentations. I'm going to introduce each presenter as just ahead of their presentation so that you can match names to faces before they disappear behind their PowerPoint slides. And we're going to start with an overview of what CEES is about. As I said, Community Energy for Energy Solidarity, or CEES. And Lucy Anazon is going to walk us through that. So in order to get started with the first session of presentations, I want to introduce to you Lucy Anazon, who is in charge of European projects at Enercoup, as well as the General Secretary of the Cooperative. She has worked on citizen empowerment and involvement in policies in her previous experiences. And for the CEES project, she is specifically in charge of the technical coordination and the launch of the ENERCOP pilot, an energy solidarity task force for their clients. And for those of you who don't know ENERCOP, it's a French cooperative supplying and producing renewable electricity and providing energy services. There are 11 cooperatives across France in almost every one of the French territories. And they're locally based, but have a shared governance. So Lucy, I'm going to share my screen so that you can give your presentation. So let's just get that going. And if you want, you can go ahead and say anything you'd like about yourself to get started.
Well, you already said a lot. So, hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar. So I'm really glad to welcome you all at the beginning of this whole day long. So yeah, Marilyn already said that I was working for Enercop, a French cooperative. We are, as all the panelists today, partners in this CEES project. CEES, which means Community Energy for Energy Solidarity, a project launched in June 21 with fundings from the EU Horizon 2020 program. So I will quickly introduce the CEES project, but yeah, we felt it was important to have a strong common voice on the context in which more and more European households fall in energy poverty these days. And with so little means to get help, we really wanted to emphasize on that subject for this introduction. So next slide, please. Oh yeah, the slide is moving, but you can just put all the partners. Yeah, thank you. So the CEES project gathered a consortium of 11 partners, 7 involved in energy poverty alleviation on the ground. So that's in UK, Ali Energy and Repowering London. In France, Enercop, Énergie Solidaire and Les Sept Vents. In Portugal, Copernico, and in Croatia, CEES. So you will discover them throughout the whole webinar, so I won't present them individually. The 4 other partners involved are involved in communication, lobbying, coordination, and research. So this is an act from which Marilyn is from. ResCop EU, SNAP, and the University of Birmingham. They will also present themselves during the day, so I won't present them here. So next slide. Yeah, thank you. So in one sentence, what is the CEES project? The CEES project aim to validate and enlighten energy community actions that uphold energy solidarity and alleviate energy poverty. So there is 3 key notions here. So energy poverty, and next slide, please. What is energy poverty? Energy poverty is the situation in which households are unable to access affordable energy services that underpin elements of human flourishing. So I think Rosie will go through this notion afterwards, so I won't get too long on that. The second key notion is energy communities. What are energy communities? They are collectives that support equitable, democratic, and fair transition towards more local, sustainable, and efficient energy system. So Helene will probably go through this notion also later. So the third notion is at the crossroads of those 2 first notions. Energy solidarity, specifically for us, is how energy communities can be levers to alleviate energy poverty. Why are they levers? So there are several reasons that you can see here. So for us, energy communities are key actors to engage people, either in poverty or that can have an impact on energy poverty. So energy communities are really key actors to engage people together. They also raise awareness locally, being really on the ground and locally based. They raise awareness in a peer-to-peer or neighbors-to-neighbors approach, which is really important for us. So they thicken social links and they build strong community relationship, which is the key to struggle against energy poverty. And we firmly believe in a social transition, not only technological and environmental, but social transition. And through this ground-based energy communities, through this strong community relationship, we really think that this social transition can accompany the technological transition. And through the CEES project, we also hope to create new community and enhance the energy community movement, since we think it's the key to alleviate energy poverty. So in the context we're facing now, with like rocketing energy prices, social crisis, fuel restriction, we do believe that energy communities are one of the most relevant actors for all the reasons above to address the energy poverty issue. They should be supported and they should be helped, especially where they're tending to act as they are today, as social services locally, and social services that are currently drowning under solicitation of struggling households. So with that in mind, and that's the next slide, we really hope in the CEES project to empower energy communities to learn from experience from all the partners in the consortium and beyond, creating a toolkit that will lead them through our energy poverty alleviation program, and especially some recommendation for innovative funding schemes and regulatory frameworks to support energy community in each member states and at the EU level also. So yeah, that's it for me and the introduction of the introduction session. So thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Lucy. And for those of you who are listening, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentations from the first session. So if you would like to drop your questions into the chat now, we'll make sure that Lucy has time to prepare answers. But otherwise, we'll open the floor for discussion at the end of this first session. So thank you, Lucy, for that presentation about the overview of the CEES project. And now we're going to move on to some of the key concepts in relation to CEES. And the first one is going to be about energy poverty. And for this, we've invited Dr. Rosie Day to give a presentation. Dr. Rosie Day is an associate professor in human geography at the University of Birmingham, with over 15 years experience of research, publishing, and teaching on energy and social issues, including energy poverty and energy justice, and collaborating on research projects across a number of different countries. And for those of you who are not familiar with the University of Birmingham, it has been pursuing and sharing knowledge through outstanding research and world-leading research for over a century. The University of Birmingham's role in CEES is to undertake conceptual development, connect the partners, work with the most up-to-date learning from research, undertake the evaluation of the energy poverty alleviation projects in CEES, and contribute to the development of the CEES Energy Solidarity Kit. So Rosie, I'm happy to pass it over to you, and I believe you're going to share your presentation.
That's right, I'll just share my screen now. Can you see this okay?
Perfect. If you can just slip it into presentation. Excellent. All right, take it away, Rosie.
Okay, so I'm going to talk for a few minutes, as Malin said, about definitions of energy poverty. So the latest academic developments and the definitions that we're mobilising in CEES and how we're going to work with that. So I'm sure most people listening to this have got the general understanding of what energy poverty is. We might think that it's quite clear when we see this on the ground, but when you're working on projects on energy poverty, it is really helpful to have a clear definition. So having a clear definition means that you can identify indicators that you might use in order to measure the extent of the problem, and that means that you can assess the extent of energy poverty. It means that you can make comparisons. You might want to make comparisons over time to see whether there are improvements or changes, or you might want to make a comparison between different places. And a clear definition also helps you really focus your thinking on where you need to take action and how you can make changes. And it means that you can evaluate change that might come about, hopefully, as a result of action that you might take. So just a little bit of history on this, I guess, but also because there's been an evolution of definitions over time. So if you're reading about energy poverty and fuel poverty in different places, you might see some different definitions, which can make for a bit of a confusing landscape. So just to explain that a bit, so really it started in the UK with especially Brenda Boardman's work in the 1980s, which got put into UK policy in the early 1990s. The term that was used at the time, and still is actually in Britain, is fuel poverty. And the first definition that was used based on Brenda's work was that a household was in fuel poverty if they needed to spend more than 10% of their income on heating and other energy needs. So the really important thing to notice here that it's about what they would need to spend rather than necessarily what they are actually spending. So this has been an influential definition. It's sometimes called the 10% definition, and you will still see it used, but it is sometimes misapplied actually, because it's sometimes applied in terms of what people are actually spending rather than what they need to spend. So that's something to look out for. There's actually been changes in definitions in Britain since then. It's got a little complicated because of England and Scotland and Northern Ireland doing different things. It changed to the low income high costs indicator in 2013, and more recently it's been updated again. So this is the current definition that we use in England. I'm just going to minimize this window here so you can see it. So the definition that we use now it's the low income and low energy efficiency definition, and it's a household being in energy poverty if they live in a home with a poor energy efficiency rating, and once they've paid their energy bills they would be left with an income below the poverty line. So it really puts the emphasis more clearly on energy efficiency, or rather energy inefficient housing. So moving out of the UK and looking across Europe, and now I'm trying to make my screen move and it doesn't want to. Hold on. Okay, let me try here. Okay. So looking at what's happened in Europe, so from around the early 2000s, then there was a real increase in interest in the phenomenon of energy poverty across Europe. And this was across academic, social and EU policy realms, but these also work together. So academic work influences policy and so on. And the term that's been used in Europe is usually energy poverty rather than fuel poverty. So that's what you'll see more often. But the discourse in Europe very much reflected the discourse in the UK that energy poverty is a phenomenon related to energy prices, low incomes and energy inefficient housing. So because in the EU, the data sets that could be used weren't the same as the ones that we used in Britain, then there was a bit of a challenge, and there still is a challenge of how to measure energy poverty. And commonly, so research from the 2000s up until now really has often used measures from, for example, the Eurostat survey of income and living conditions, but also from national data sets that might be available. And typically measures are used either one or a combination of measures, of these measures. So looking at energy expenditure, especially in relation to income, whether households have energy debt, so whether they have problems paying their energy bills, indicators to do with housing conditions, whether people are experiencing damp or leaks or mold in their housing, and very often an inability to keep the home adequately warm. That's what's usually measured, although occasionally research looks at being able to keep cool in summer as well. So in terms of what's happened in EU policy and EC documentation, so the Commission first introduced the concept of energy poverty into the third energy package, which was around 2009. But as you probably know, the more recent Clean Energy for All Europeans package has really stepped up attention to energy poverty, and action on energy poverty is required across a number of kind of areas. It has many mentions in the package, and it's part of the just transition, the just energy transition in Europe. But there was actually still no official definition of energy poverty in the EU. So it's still up to member states or up to organisations working on energy poverty about how to define it. But in the EC documents, then the working definition that's usually used is this one that I've got in the green box, or a version of this one. So they say that energy poverty is a situation in which households are unable to access essential energy services. But the explanations of energy poverty that you'll see are still very much around poor affordability and poor housing and energy inefficiency. So turning now to academic work and the more recent developments in academic work. So academic work has recently really tried to open up this definition a bit and sort of think beyond some of the more narrow categories that have been at the centre of the definitions up until about 5 years ago. So in one sense, part of this opening up is to do with looking beyond heating. So as I've mentioned, a lot of the definitions so far have really focused on ability to keep warm, partly because this all really started in Northern Europe, where that's more of a problem. But academic work recently has looked beyond that to look at lack of access to a sufficiency of energy services, a variety of energy services. So this would include heating and cooling, but also lighting, refrigeration, cooking, hot water, ICT, all the kinds of services we want from energy. And you might notice actually that this definition has influenced the latest EU working definition that I mentioned on the last slide. So that does actually talk about energy services rather than just heating. Also looking beyond income and housing as the causes or the drivers of energy. So access to energy and energy services might be compromised for a number of diverse reasons. So this might include infrastructure and energy efficient housing, also incomes, but also it can be policy, social relations, geopolitics, as we're seeing very much now with situations across Europe. So many ways in which households might come into energy poverty, not just due to incomes and energy inefficiency. And then also looking beyond affordability of energy only and thinking a bit more about what energy is for. So connecting energy services with a number of outcomes and with multi-dimensional well-being. And one way we've been doing this is through the capabilities approach, which I'll say a bit more on the next slide. So as you might know, the capabilities approach is an approach to poverty and development, which draws on the well-known work of Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum, economists and philosophers. And this focuses on the things that we value being and doing. So functionings are the things that we're able to do and be, and capabilities are like the opportunities that we have. And not all, but many capabilities are actually essential for a flourishing life. So things like being able to be healthy, being able to have social relations, being able to engage in employment and cultural life, having dignity and social respect, for example. So these are all really essential for a flourishing life. So this approach to energy poverty connects energy services with these things, with these capabilities. So in this sense, if you're taking this approach, this leads us to think of energy poverty as capability deprivation that comes about due to a lack of access to energy services. And this is a definition that the Covenant of Mayors is now sometimes using in Europe, for example. So in the CEES project, there's the definition built on this that we're mobilizing is this. So we're seeing that energy poverty is a situation in which households are unable to access affordable energy services, which would include adequate warmth, cooling, lighting, and energy to power appliances that underpin elements of human flourishing, such as health and well-being, relationships, social inclusion, employment, recreation, and education. And having got this definition, this means that we will be in the project assessing energy poverty through these indicators. So including whether households are restricted in a range of energy services. So whether they're experiencing or they are restricting themselves in heating, cooling, lighting, etc. The multitude of energy services that I mentioned. Also, whether households are experiencing compromised well-being in the sense of capabilities due to their limited energy services. So are they compromised in their physical and mental health, but also in their ability to access education, work, relationships, recreation, dignity, social respect, and so on. And we'll also still be looking at whether households are experiencing difficulties paying energy bills, because obviously affordability is still a really important driver of energy poverty, especially at the moment. So in the CEES project, we'll be doing this through our own bespoke surveys, because there aren't really existing data sets that would allow us to collect information on all of those things, although it might be possible in some circumstances for organisations to be able to use existing data sets to kind of piece together measures on some of these things. So the advantages of this approach that we're taking, I think, just to summarise, is that this means that, in contrast to previous more narrow definitions of energy poverty, it means we're paying attention to a range of essential energy services. So this suits a range of regional contexts rather than just focusing on heating, for example, which might suit Northern Europe. It means that we can more flexibly use this definition across a range of different contexts, climates, but also household types, because different household compositions might need different kinds of energy services to a greater or lesser degree. It also means, really importantly, that we pay attention to a range of impacts. So not just whether people can keep warm or cool, but also whether they can access education, whether they can do their laundry, and so on. And I think another thing that's quite helpful and important, actually, is that it connects the concept of energy poverty with wider concepts of poverty and human development, which I think is quite useful, and it stops us seeing energy poverty as a very kind of isolated and siloed phenomenon. So that's it for my talk. I hope that was helpful. If you'd like to follow up on any of this or want more information, then please feel free to contact any of us at the University of Birmingham, and our details are here on this slide. Thanks.
Thanks, Rosie. That was really insightful. And what we will do is continue with the next speaker in this session, and we'll have a question and answer at the end of the session. So do feel free to put your questions into the chat now, but know that we'll do the Q&A at the end of the session. And thanks again, Rosie, and we'll see you during the Q&A. All right, so our next speaker in this first session about what is CEES is Helen Schokart, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, so please do correct me if you want. Helene works with ResCoop, which is the EU Federation for Citizen Energy Cooperatives, a growing network of 1,900 European energy cooperatives and the 1.25 million citizens who are active in the energy transition through energy cooperatives. Helene is a project manager for ResCoop EU with expertise on energy poverty and energy justice. For the CEES project, she is closely follows the European legal framework on energy communities and on energy poverty, and how it's evolving in the context of both Fit for 55 and Repower EU. So Helene, I'm going to hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Yeah, and thanks for pronouncing my name very correctly. I know it's difficult, but you did well. So I have a presentation for you in which I will focus on energy communities and what they are. Marilyn's going to share her screen for me, and I will just signal whenever we have to go to the next slides. So let me just grab my... Yes, so there we are. So on this first slide, I wanna talk about the movement. So while the energy community movement is not new, we have seen growing interest in the alternative way of organizing the energy system that they present among a growing number of people and stakeholders, especially in the past couple of months. Well, before that as well, but of course, in the context of the ongoing energy crisis, we see that people are investigating different ways to engage in the energy system and are often then also knocking on the door of energy communities. But we also received questions from journalists, policymakers, citizens, other organizations asking about, okay, what are energy communities? What role can they play in the energy transition? And what role can they play in tackling energy poverty, which is, of course, high on the agenda for many policymakers now. It's all over the news. It should have been for a long time, if you ask us, but yeah, we're happy with the attention that it gets right now. Although, yeah, it's all for all the wrong reasons because the numbers are growing. And so, yeah, it's especially this last question that takes a central role in the CEES project. While we already thought of it as a timely question when proposing the projects, we see that more and more people, yeah, want to have some clarification about, okay, you have energy communities and we see the benefits that can have, but also for vulnerable people in particular, what is the added value? So with this project, I think this period specifically is very important for us to provide further clarification on this, to research around that, and strongly position ourselves and the citizens that we represent as key players in a just energy transition. Now, what is community energy? Before we jump into discussing all of what we've been doing the past 1 year and a half in the other sessions. One of the basics is, of course, to understand community energy. And in general, energy communities are a socially innovative way of organizing the energy system. But there are many different ways to define community energy, as there are many different ways citizen groups or group themselves around energy projects, clean energy projects. In general, though, we consider community energy to be any project or initiative where people have ownership and a meaningful say in the running of a renewable energy or energy-related service. And they all share similar values and ambitions, which are not commercially driven, but focus on environmental, social, or local economic values. And then in 2019, with the clean energy package, EU citizens won the right to participate in the energy transition. So that was a big win. Energy communities came to be acknowledged by European law with 2 official definitions for EC. So we can now find definitions for citizen energy communities in the Electricity Market Directive and renewable energy communities in the Renewable Energy Directive. This acknowledgement comes with a legal obligation for member states to create an enabling framework to support community energy in their country. And significantly, it's the Renewable Energy Directive that stresses the importance of participation of vulnerable and low-income households in renewable energy communities, as they can help, and this is literally stated in the directive, fight energy poverty through reduced consumption and lower supply tariffs. So therefore, member states must ensure their accessibility to low-income and vulnerable households. You can go to the next slide, Marilyn. So this presented an opportunity. So the clean energy package and that recognition and EU legal directives presented an opportunity to call for more people-powered energy initiatives and for governments to support them. So together with Friends of the Earth and Energy Cities, RescuePU launched a community energy guide that highlights 10 reasons to start or join a community energy project. And you can see energy poverty reduction is one of them. With the current crisis in mind, and also with the CEES project, we really want to specifically highlight or focus on the third one. The potential of energy communities to tackle energy poverty. But this is something that is very, it's very unexplored and something that we really need to map. So yeah, that's what we are going to try and do. On the next slide, then, I wanted to give you an idea of the potential towards putting power back in the hands of people. So a CE Delft study from 2016 revealed that over 264 million European citizens, so about half of the European population, could be producing their own energy by 2050 at home or together in energy communities. And then there was also a YouGov study commissioned by the European Climate Foundation that revealed that 61% of Europeans would like to join an energy cooperative if one were to set up in their local area. So there's this enormous appetite to do something. And if you combine that with, connecting it to energy poverty alleviation as a priority, I think there's so much potential to create a just energy system, which is, I think, not really there in the traditional one. So on the last slide, then, I wanted to come back to the current fossil fuel crisis. So we need to, especially in the current crisis, position ourselves as actors with a non-commercial purpose. Amongst energy communities, we've seen resilience throughout the current crisis, ensuring clean and affordable energy through citizen-owned and managed projects stimulating energy efficiency, behavior change, and locally producing their own energy. So we also see it as a sort of security of supply issue, or yeah, we also position ourselves as a way to ensure security of supply because we're doing it locally and we're not making ourselves dependent from other actors, but also yeah, resilience from the market fluctuations. But it's not all about that. It's also about energy cooperatives or communities presenting yeah, mechanisms for participative and collective decision making, problem solving, and action. And this is really the potential that we want to highlight also for people in energy poverty or in vulnerable situations, that it creates social cohesion, places to raise awareness, educate ourselves on energy, and yeah, so that's it for me. I hope it was in some way enlightening, and will provide some clarity for the things that we will be saying in the rest of our
Great.
CEES day.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Helene. And certainly, as I mentioned, we'll be doing a Q&A session at the end of this first whole session, and we will hear from Helene later today as well to give more information about the role of ResCoop within the CEES project. So thank you, Helene, and we will come back with questions in a few minutes. Okay, thank you very much, Helene, for that overview of what energy communities are. And I know that later this afternoon, you're going to talk a little bit more about how they've evolved, not only as what they are, but how they're recognized by the European Union and in different policy frameworks later on this afternoon. But right now, what we want to do is talk about the third aspect or the third principle of the CEES project, which is energy solidarity. And for that, I'm going to introduce you to Sabrine Baudelim, sorry, from Les Sept Vents. And Les Sept Vents is a cooperative society of collective interest in France. It's been working for more than 20 years to accelerate changes towards sustainable systems, particularly in the energy and ecological fields. It's a nonprofit company that supports public bodies, communities, businesses, and individuals in reducing their footprint on the planet by drawing on their lived experiences. To bring about long-term changes, Les Sept Vents aims to make them desirable, to encourage the willingness to change, doable, to ensure the ability to change, and rational, which again reflects the willingness to change. And Sabrine comes to Les Sept Vents fairly recently, after a career in governmental and non-governmental organizations working on the subjects of circular economy, sustainable tourism, and energy transition. She is a project manager for Les Sept Vents and works there on subjects of sustainable buildings, the fight against energy poverty, and the transition of organizations. And she wishes to contribute to the emergence of systems ensuring the preservation of our habitat through a transdisciplinary approach. So Sabrine, I'm going to let you take over the camera and share your slides when you're ready.
Thanks a lot. So I'm sharing my thing. I hope it works now.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah. So, as Marilyn said, I'm going to talk about some forms of what is called energy solidarity in this session. But first, I'd like to take a quick look at the wonderful project of CEES. So all the organizations you can see here are represent and use one or more examples of actions aimed at energy solidarity, and try to test new energy solidarity options and ways in this experimentation. So the first one I'm going to present is Enercop and Énergie Solidaire, which work on the concept of funding in the energy solidarity. The economic aspect indeed cannot be ignored when you are going to try to support some energy poor households, and the donations of some can help others to pay energy bills, to improve the energy performance of their habitat, or equip themselves with economical or clean heating means, for example. And the second partner of the project is Repowering London, which works on community engagement. It's a case where the human being is a living force and involved beyond the material in order to support households in the optimal use of their living space. We put in this action at the heart of the work and project the fact of transforming the target audience into a committed actor of change. The main result is to see them take ownership of their home and any changes that will be made to it. We also have Ali Energy, which works on the most strategic and difficult moments of lifetime, and they give advice, technical advice, and they make home visits and diagnosis, and they train people to change their behavior, to use better their home, and to make better energy choices. The other project partner is CEES, which works also on the engagement of the community, and they focus more on targeting the investors to make more advanced and just energy transition choices. The other project partner is Copernico, which makes cooperative loans. It's another example related to the economic aspect we saw earlier. They offer low-interest loans to support installation of renewable energy sources, and they target households capable of investing in a renewable energy installation. So it's slightly better off public than in some of the cases that we have seen so far. Finally, the model that Les Sept Vents, where I work, try to make better known is the solidarity by targeting, by getting your hands dirty. So in this activity that we consider as old as our, as the humankind, we think that it's enough to identify the need of a person of our territory, to understand what they can improve in their situation, and to act with them in groups most of the time, and with good mood, it's the better. So this type of action brings both material and social added value. I will talk more about this later this afternoon. I wanted to make some examples of energy solidarity in the French ecosystem. You have in this slide some examples which are like Bois Bocage Énergie, a local organization here in Normandy that uses their activity in the market of heating wood to maintain the biodiversity in what we call in Normandy the bocage. You have other examples like Les Compagnons Bâtisseurs, which and Enerter also, who makes many workshops and volunteering actions through France. Enerter is more localized in Normandy, and you have a network like Twiza, which makes people that need help and people that want to give some help interact and find ways to cooperate. The two other examples are Électriciens Sans Frontières and Ingénieurs Sans Frontières. And here they act in making energy not affordable, but accessible. So they work mainly with populations that don't have access to energy, and make them build what's necessary to access to this energy. And the last examples are La Croix-Rouge, EDF, which work every year and every winter to make sure people, even if they are not able to pay their bills, so they don't get their electricity or gas shut off. So it's like right in France to be able to heat in the winter anyway, even if you can't pay. For the last word, here at the CEES, we have a special point of view regarding energy solidarity. And what we see is more important is that in all action of energy solidarity that you are going to make, just make sure that the inhabitant is involved in the action and takes ownership of all the process and of its house at the end. We want all action to be oriented towards empowerment and learning and sharing, and to always be applied in the total respect of the targeted public. And this is what is our main way to see in and to act in all our projects, and especially in the case of energy solidarity. So thank you very much, Marilyn, for letting me share this with you. And if there's any question, I'm available for it.
Great. Thank you so much, Sabrine. And I've just actually looked at the time, and given that we have another session starting shortly, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to say that we won't actually have a Q&A session on this opening session where we've described the key principles of energy solidarity. But do join us again in about 10 minutes for the next session, which will focus on how do you identify people in energy poverty and engage not only with them, but also with other actors who are working on energy poverty or on other social issues that are often linked to energy poverty. So again, thank you to each of our speakers for this first session describing what CEES is about and the principles of energy poverty, energy community, and energy solidarity. And we will see you all again shortly, I hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you.